My lesbian era started during a routine checkup. The fluorescent lights of the clinic buzzed overhead as I sat in the waiting room, convinced I was dying. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My heart raced at random moments, and I'd been waking up at 3 in the morning drenched in sweat for weeks. At 28, I'd built what everyone called a perfect life, a successful marketing career, a beautiful apartment in the city, a devoted boyfriend of 5 years named Marcus who wanted to propose. Yet something inside me was crumbling and I couldn't name it. I thought it was my health. I thought maybe it was cancer, or some rare disease that would finally explain why I felt like I was suffocating in my own skin. I never imagined that the diagnosis would be something far more terrifying and liberating than any illness could ever be. The nurse who called my name had auburn hair pulled back in a loose bun, and when she smiled at me, something shifted in my chest that I immediately dismissed as another symptom. I followed her down the corridor, clutching my purse like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. She took my vitals with gentle efficiency, her fingers grazing my wrist as she checked my pulse, and I found myself holding my breath for reasons that had nothing to do with medical anxiety. Her name tag read Emma, and she made small talk about the unseasonable warmth of October while wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. I responded mechanically, but internally I was cataloging things I had no business noticing. The freckles scattered across her collarbone, the way her scrubs brought out the green in her hazel eyes, the softness in her voice when she told me to relax and breathe. The doctor found nothing wrong with me. My blood work came back perfect. My heart was healthy. My thyroid was fine. She suggested it might be stress or anxiety, and recommended I see a therapist, maybe try meditation or yoga. I left that appointment feeling more lost than when I'd arrived, because now I didn't even have the comfort of a medical explanation. I had to face the possibility that the problem wasn't in my body at all. It was in my life. It was in the way I felt nothing when Marcus kissed me. It was in the way I'd been going through the motions of my own existence like an actress playing a role she never auditioned for. It was in the way I couldn't stop thinking about Emma's smile for the rest of that day, and the day after, and the week that followed. I went back to the clinic 3 weeks later with a manufactured complaint about persistent headaches. I told myself I needed a second opinion, that maybe they'd missed something, but the truth was simmering just beneath my conscious awareness, waiting for me to be brave enough to look at it. Emma was there again, and when she saw me, her face brightened with recognition. She asked how I'd been feeling, and I lied and said better mostly. She led me to the same examination room, and this time our small talk went deeper. She mentioned she'd just moved to the city 6 months ago, that she was still finding her way around, still looking for her community. There was something in the way she said community that made my pulse quicken. She recommended a coffee shop a few blocks away, said they had the best lavender lattes and a welcoming atmosphere. The way she emphasized welcoming felt deliberate, coded, like she was offering me a map to a world I didn't know I was searching for. I started going to that coffee shop every Sunday morning. At first I went alone, telling Marcus I needed time to work on personal projects. The space was cozy and filled with art from local queer artists, pride flags subtle but present, and a clientele that felt different from anywhere I'd spent time before. I'd sit with my laptop pretending to work, but really I was watching. I was observing women greeting each other with easy affection, couples holding hands across tables, people existing in their authenticity without apology. I felt like an anthropologist studying a culture I desperately wanted to belong to but didn't know how to enter. The longing that filled me in that coffee shop was so intense it almost hurt. It was the feeling of recognizing home in a place you've never been. On my 4th visit, Emma walked in. Our eyes met across the room, and her smile was surprised and genuine. She came over and asked if she could join me, and I nodded, unable to form words. We talked for 3 hours that day. She told me about growing up in a small town, where being different meant being invisible, about coming out at 21 and losing half her family, about rebuilding herself from the ground up and finding strength she never knew she had. I told her about my career, about Marcus, about the vague unease that had been shadowing me for years. I didn't tell her about the panic attacks or the 3 a.m. wake-ups, but somehow I think she understood anyway. When we finally parted ways, She touched my arm and said that if I ever needed someone to talk to, really talk to, she was there. The spot where her hand had rested on my forearm burned for hours afterward. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Marcus in the bed we'd shared for 3 years, listening to his peaceful breathing, and felt like I was being buried alive. I'd spent my entire adult life performing heterosexuality without realizing it was a performance. I'd followed the script I'd been given. Date boys, find a good man, build toward marriage and children and suburban stability. I'd never questioned it because I'd never had language for the alternative. I dismissed every fleeting attraction to women as admiration or friendship, had convinced myself that everyone felt that way about their close female friends. I'd suffocated every instinct that didn't fit the narrative, and my body had been screaming at me to pay attention. The panic attacks weren't random. They were my truth trying to claw its way to the surface. I started seeing the therapist the doctor had recommended. It took me 5 sessions to say the words out loud. I remember the exact moment I was talking about Emma, about the coffee shop, about this feeling I couldn't shake. And suddenly I just said it. I think I might be gay. The words hung in the air like something fragile and new. My therapist didn't react with shock or judgment. She just asked me how it felt to say that out loud. I started crying, deep sobs that came from somewhere ancient inside me. It felt like relief. It felt like terror. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for 28 years and had finally been given permission to exhale. Breaking up with Marcus was the hardest thing I'd ever done. He was a good man, kind and patient, and he deserved so much more than someone who could never love him the way he needed. When I told him, I didn't give him the full truth. I said I needed space, that I needed to figure out who I was. He cried and asked if there was someone else, and I said no, which was technically true but also the biggest lie. There was someone else. There was the person I was supposed to be, the version of myself I'd buried so deep I'd almost lost her entirely. He moved out within 2 weeks, taking half our life together in cardboard boxes, and I sat in the empty apartment feeling simultaneously devastated and free. If this story is touching your heart, if you've ever felt the weight of living someone else's truth, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Stories like these remind us that we're not alone in our journeys. Your engagement helps this message reach others who might be struggling in silence, searching for the courage to become who they really are. I reached out to Emma a month after my breakup. I asked if she wanted to get coffee, and she said yes immediately. We met at that same coffee shop on a Sunday morning, and this time I wasn't observing from the outside. This time I was choosing to be present in my own life. We talked for hours again, but the conversation was different. I was different. I told her everything, about Marcus, about my realization, about the terror and exhilaration of starting over. She listened with such compassion, such understanding, and when I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. She said that coming out, coming into yourself, was the bravest thing anyone could do. She said I was at the beginning of something beautiful, even though it didn't feel that way yet. We started spending more time together. Emma introduced me to her friends, welcomed me into the community I'd been orbiting. I went to my first Pride event, small and local, and cried through most of it. I was surrounded by people who'd walked the path I was just beginning, who'd survived and thrived, who'd built lives of authenticity and joy. I felt seen in a way I never had before. Emma and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into something I was terrified to name. I wasn't ready for a relationship. I was barely ready to claim my own identity, but the way she looked at me, the way my heart raced when she laughed, the way I caught myself thinking about her at random moments throughout the day, it was undeniable. 6 months after that first coffee shop conversation, Emma and I were walking through the park on a spring evening when she stopped and turned to face me. The sunset painted everything gold, and she looked nervous in a way I'd never seen her. She said she knew I was still figuring things out, and she didn't want to pressure me, but she needed me to know that she had feelings for me, real feelings. She said she'd wait as long as I needed, but she couldn't keep pretending we were just friends. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I could have retreated. I could have protected myself with excuses and fear. Instead, I stepped forward and kissed her. That kiss was nothing like anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't performative or obligatory. It was real and electric and right in a way that made every other kiss I'd ever had seem like a pale imitation. When we pulled apart, I was shaking, but this time it wasn't panic. It was recognition. It was my body saying, yes, finally, this is who you are. Emma smiled at me with tears in her eyes, and I realized I was crying too. Before I share how this journey continues to unfold, I want to ask you something. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, please leave a comment below. Tell me about your own journey, or simply write the word courage if you're still finding yours. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone, and your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. The months that followed weren't easy. Coming out to my family was complicated and messy. Some embraced me immediately. Others needed time. A few haven't spoken to me since. I lost friends who couldn't reconcile the person I'd been pretending to be with the person I actually am. But I also found a new family, a chosen family, people who celebrated my truth and held space for all of me. Emma and I moved slowly, building a relationship on a foundation of honesty and patience. She taught me that love doesn't have to feel like drowning. It can feel like coming up for air. That routine checkup didn't save my life by diagnosing an illness. It saved my life by introducing me to someone who reflected back a version of myself I'd never allowed to exist. My panic attacks stopped. The 3 a.m. wake-ups faded. The suffocating feeling lifted. Not because I found a woman to love, but because I found the courage to stop lying to myself. I found the courage to choose authenticity over comfort, truth over performance, myself over expectations. I'm 30 now. Emma and I have been together for almost 2 years. We're building a life that feels real and true and ours. I look back at that terrified woman in the clinic waiting room, convinced she was dying, and I want to tell her that she was right. She was dying. The false version of herself was dying. And from that death came the most beautiful rebirth. My lesbian era didn't just start during a routine checkup. My real life started there. The life where I'm finally, fully, authentically myself.